及一切众生，请转妙法轮，教导我们如何了生脱死，离苦得乐，速证无生。Sangha with great virtue, out of compassion, for the sake of this assembly and all living beings, please turn the wonderful Dharma wheel to teach us how to leave suffering and attain bliss and end earth and death, and quickly realize non-birth.
Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa.
Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa.
Homage to the blessed, noble, and perfectly enlightened one.
Homage to the blessed, noble, and perfectly enlightened one.
Namo sadanto suchedoye alahadi samyao samputoshe.
Namo sadanto suchetoye alahadi samyao samputoshe.
无上甚深微妙法，百千万劫难遭遇。我今见闻得受持，愿解如来真实义。Supreme and wondrous Dharma, subtle and profound, rarely is encountered, even in billions of eons. But now we see and hear it and accept it reverently. May we truly understand the Buddha's actual meaning. Amitofo. Jason, I'm hearing an echo. Do you have any audio playing there? Can you turn all the audio off, please? No, it's echoing somewhere else. Can you catch it? Do you hear? What are the audio inputs? Jinchuan, do you hear it echoing? Yes. If you could find that, please. Yeah, thank you. You want to? Don't turn everything off because you might cut off my mics. Got it? Good, thank you. Okay. Well done, bravo. Appreciate the Dharma request, everyone. Let us invoke our spiritual presence. The Avatamsaka Assembly of Buddhas and Bodhisattvas. Oh think if I were an Avatamsaka Bodhisattva, I would feel welcomed and invited. If we meet one, we'll have to ask him or her. The Chochenyo Ohlone people practiced spiritual connections to the earth and to all creation here on their ancestral land for tens of thousands of years. Today we acknowledge them as traditional custodians and the original storytellers of these lands. We offer our respects to their elders past, present, and emerging, and to all First Nations peoples whose sovereignty was never ceded. Indeed we do. Okay, how's the resolution up here? Clear? Kandadauma? Not so good on the screen? Is it visible? Jinchuan, can you see the...
It's like that.
Sort of? Better?
Turn off the light, that'll be better.
Okay.
Yeah, can you put the screen down, Jason?
Okay, good. Yep. Better, huh? You can see it? Okay, good. So, I've been talking to, maybe I need to leave that there. Okay. I've been talking to Madalena Tanmujiet about Shifu's lecturing Dharma. She reminded me that there was a period in our lecturing history with Shifu when he included something that we have left out, and it was called the bell song. 靠中基 金佛师叫什么？口中记 And Shifu did it every time he lectured, which was every night. And he asked his disciples to translate it into English, and we did. A very nice translation. And it was part of our protocol, part of the preparation for listening to sutras every time. We've stopped doing it, and I can't tell you why, but we did. So Madalena reminded me that it was probably a good idea to see if we can't bring it back. So that's the plan. Tonight, I won't start it. I won't introduce it tonight to you from my mouth because I'm, Billy, we have a monastic guest. Could you sit over one?
Yeah, sure.
He hasn't shown up yet, but we hope he will, yeah. So tonight, this week I had a flu, and it's decided to settle right here tonight. I thought it might be done, and I wanted not to miss the lecture, so I thought give it a try. So if you all don't mind listening to my scratchy voice, I'm okay bringing it out. I don't know about your ears, how it sounds. In any case, let's see. The last time I tried this, people told me that the quality was not good, but that was with a different microphone. Is this okay? Is it clearer? Because it takes much less chi if I have this here. Okay, good. So let's launch into it and see how long it lasts. See how long my voice goes. Here we go. Ready? 犹如镜虚空，非思不可见， 随现一切事，无能见空者。It is also like pure infinite space, that without the presence of forms cannot be seen, while it makes every form appear. Still no one can see space itself. Still no body can see space itself. Okay, one more. We're going to put these two together. 诸佛亦如是，普现无量色，非心所行处，一切莫能度。All right, Buddhas are the same, appearing everywhere in forms beyond measure. This is not where the mind works, and nobody can see it at work. Okay, we got to interpret that carefully. Look at the Chinese. Okay, Yo, again, Ru, like, Jing, pure, Xu Kong, empty space, or just space itself. This is our Bodhisattva, forest of knowledge. And he's saying, what are the Buddhas like? What's it like when you see a Buddha? Anybody ever wonder? Like, how come we haven't seen a Buddha for a while? They're hard to see. There's one on the back wall. There's 4 of them up here. There's one way up high behind the screen in colors. Just like pure empty space, or just like air, thin air, 非是不可见, which no form cannot be seen. Okay, check it out. It's saying, okay, here's a bell, a Chinese Buddhist bell. They're saying, if it weren't for the bell, you would never see empty space. Ah, that's interesting. Interesting reflection. That right now, can you see the air? You have to have something in it before you can see the air around it. That's an interesting observation, right? Have anybody ever, maybe in college, maybe in high school, you took an art appreciation class or art history, or maybe you took a class in, aesthetics or painting or something, and the teacher might have said to you, notice negative space. Okay? Some people are nodding their heads, yeah. What is negative space? It's where there isn't anything around the thing that your eyes usually go to. So my grandmother, bless her heart, Lucy Kerr, was a painter. And she took up painting. Her husband died and left her to raise 6 kids on her own in the Depression. And she did that successfully, and thank goodness, my mother included. And later on in her years, she went to the local museum in Washington, D.C., and learned how to paint, just as a hobby, just to give her something to do. She painted nice landscapes. It was, what were they called? Still life. Still life. So here was a table, here was a rose, here was a plate full of apples, and they were very nice. You look at, oh, nice. Who painted that? I did. Oh, really good. That kind of a hobbyist. And in her painting of apples on the table, you saw the apples. That was it. And they weren't meant to look lifelike. They were a painter's view of the apples. Kind of, it wasn't photorealism. She didn't try to make it look like a photograph. It was a painting. It was nice. They looked tasty. It looked like you could reach out and, get a juicy, cool, fresh, crispy apple. Never, as I looked at grandmother's paintings of still life, did I think, oh, look at the space on either side of the apple where there's nothing. And yet, just like our verse says, if it wasn't for the place where there was nothing in the canvas, I wouldn't have seen the apple. He's saying, when you have an apple, that's when you can see the space around it. And that's like, oh. So there's a whole school of art appreciation that says, look at the negative space. Here's another example. This is a really important one, I think, for understanding the Dharma, which is, when next time you see the moon, where are we in the moon? In the full? Are we in new moon? Okay. So in the new moon, there's only a crescent, or even if it's really new moon, there's nothing. It's dark. You know, there's no light on the moon, and then 2 weeks later, there's this big round moon. 1 week later, there's half, gibbous, waning, or waxing. Do this. Next time you see a crescent moon, no matter how big, just a sliver or a quarter or a half, focus your eyes again on the dark part. And what you'll see is there's a faint, what do they call it? The penumbra. There's a faint line around the dark side of the moon. And if you really just take a look, refocus, and at a certain point you'll realize you can see the whole moon. Part of it is dark. It's simply that our eyes are trained to go to the good part, to the lighted part. And yet the entire moon has always been there. We just are in the habit of not looking there. Another example. We don't have, these are all specially, okay, here we go. These are poinsettias, right? One here, one there. Poinsettias, the red ones. How many times when you look at these flowers do you go, oh man, really nice leaves? Look at how cool that stem is. That's a very cool poinsettia stem. We don't, do we? We're trained to say pretty only because it's red and the bloom. And yet, you've never, ever, ever looked at that plant and not had the stem and the leaves, and down below the roots too, which you can't see. It's always been there. We're trained to look at the colorful part, the good part. So how useful to have something like the Dizampusa Banyanjing, our Earth Store Sutra, where in the sutra, the Buddha says, yeah, by the way, Earth Store says, they're the hells too. The hells are always there. They have never gone away because living beings are always creating the karma of the hells. So it's like, oh, you didn't know that? Oh yeah, it's always been there. We just don't go there. We don't think about it. So now that's going down to the dark side, right? But it's true that if we look at the moon and refocus our eyes, we go, oh, funny, it's always been there, but I just by habit go to the bright part. And if I just shift, oh, I can see the whole moon faintly outlined by the penumbra around the edge. And if I take a minute and look at the flower, oh yeah, you don't get the blossom without the leaves and the stem and the roots and the dirt. Only with all those conditions do you get the pretty red blossom. So, back to grandmother's still life painting. Only after I took an art appreciation class did the professor say, negative space, meaning look where there's nothing, and appreciate how that sets off the thing you're looking at, the object. You don't get the object without the space around it. Okay, 非是不可见. Without the presence of forms, the pure infinite space cannot be seen. You don't see space without the bell. And then when you see the bell, it's like, oh yeah, there's stuff all around it. That's interesting. 随现一切事, although all kinds of forms appear in space, 无能监控者, nobody can actually see space. Although space can make everything appear, there's nothing that appears to your eyes outside of empty space, outside of air. Show me space itself. And you go, here, it's everywhere, but you can't see it. Like a fish doesn't know it's in the water. So you go, okay, why is the Bodhisattva telling me this? Why is this helpful to me? Having him tell me this, what's the value in that? He's saying, be patient, grasshopper, because Buddhas are the same. So you got the argument here, right? It's kind of abstract. It's the emptiness that shows you the thing. Without the emptiness, you don't see the thing. All things appear in emptiness, but you never see emptiness. Okay. And 诸佛亦如是，普现无量色. All Buddhas, the Buddhas are just the same way. They make limitless forms appear. 非心所行处. However, not mind can travel place. Your mind is never going to see the whole thing. 一切莫能度. Simply, you're just not capable. We're not capable of seeing the entirety of worlds and living beings. Buddhas are the same, appearing everywhere in forms beyond measure. This is not where the mind works, and nobody can see the whole thing. Okay, what's his point? Here's where we see the Buddha. Interesting. So, what do Christians say? Christians call it kingdom of God. You want to see God? Well, you're not supposed to. You're not supposed to name him either. He's beyond naming. But they say you can see him everywhere in his creation, meaning everything in the world is God. Kingdom of God, they say. What do the Buddhists say? Dharma body. What is the Dharma body? It's everything appearing in forms beyond measure. But you want to see it because we are part of it, and we have this consciousness that is, if I want to see everything, at this point, watch this, my hands, I can still see it, still see it, still see it, still see it, can't see it. At this point, my vision quits if I want to see my hand, right? Ears, not so. Ears can hear 360. Nose, pretty good. I can't smell something far away, but if there are chocolate chip cookies back here, I can smell them. Over here, I can smell it. Okay. Pizza, I can smell it anywhere, But eyes quit. So senses are really limited. And yet, Buddhas are behind everything, and yet you want to see the Buddha? Sorry. Not until you transcend the limitations of your senses. How do you do that? Samadhi. Meditate. There's a place inside the mind where all the senses arise. Meditate below or beyond that place. What happens? You go past the self. Once you can do that, which any meditator can, suddenly there's a flip, and the me and mine becomes the we and ours, and everyone's. Great compassion. So, excuse me, that's what Forest of Knowledge wants us to know. This is a statement about the Buddha. Very interesting. Okay, so it is like space, but that's what the Buddhas are like too. Okay, this is Buddha Dharma, right? He's praising the Buddha. He's not saying, oh, the Buddha's so good. Praise Buddha. Hallelujah. But he is in a fascinating way, which is like really real and concrete. You want to see the Buddha? You won't. But I'll tell you what he's like. He's like something that surrounds us every second, but we can't see it. The air. That's what the Buddha's like. He's like the air. And can you see the air? Well, down in Los Angeles on a smoggy day, yeah, you can. It's yellow. That's LA and the smog. This morning, was it foggy? Did you get up this morning? Foggy. Anybody see? This morning was really foggy. Were you all really foggy this morning? Sleeping in? Yeah, I don't know. Just foggy this morning, at least here in Central Berkeley. Have you ever come down on 101 from Marin County and looked over at the East Bay when the bed of fog is here? It's amazing because we're coming down from CTDB so often. Sometimes the fog comes through the Golden Gate, across the bay, and it just sits on the East Bay. You know, Berkeley and Oakland, from Fremont up to Richmond. And it's just like a blanket. It really is a blanket of fog. And then by 11 a.m., burns off. It's amazing how it's so localized. Well, we had that blanket this morning. So, in that case, you can see the air because there's something in it. But ordinarily, air itself is pure. And we can't do without it, but you can't find it either. So, Forest of Knowledge is saying, yeah, the Buddhas are like that too. They're always here, inspiring everything that we do, but if you want to see them, you can't do it with your eyes. That's not the way to see the Buddhas. So, okay. Hold on here. How do you like my goldfish, by the way? Aren't they nice? Gold Coast Dharma Realm. We can get an early start on our blessings. So, if you remember, on Sunday nights, I'm doing the 10 transferences chapter. And because we're studying how bodhisattvas in the Avatamsaka transfer merit, the first step is they create some merit. They do some good deed. They cultivate. Usually it's giving, mostly. Then they take that merit and they give it away again with their thoughts. they make a wish. And the wishes are super creative. They're really complex and kind of beautiful. And there are two things that change every time. One is who they dedicate it to, and two is with what wish. So they dedicate it to somebody with the wish that's the 10 transferences. And then there's always 10 varieties, 10 options of how they do it, their thoughts and their wishes. So what the sutra is, it's a window into the mind of an actual bodhisattva, what he or she thinks as they dedicate merit. And the process of what they're doing is, so here's the feeling behind it. You've heard, the Bodhi resolve, right? This magical thing that after, we'll put this away for a minute. So after my pilgrimage was done, after 3 steps, 1 bow reached city of 10,000 Buddhas, Master Hua met Marty, Professor Verhoeven, Marty and I, and he said, you two need to learn something, he said. I've invited Hui Seng Lao Fa Shi to explain the Quan Fa Puti Xinwen for you, he said. And I'm like, okay, all good, Shifu. What's that? What is it? Shifu said, this is something you don't understand yet. So Master Hui Seng went ahead and did it. He kept coming up from San Francisco, and he would lecture once a week. And there was, he didn't have enough time to finish it, so the last section, Shifu explained himself. But we had a brand new, appreciation of what is the Bodhi resolve after, just a second. Jason, I had my YouTube, I had my Zoom mic unmuted. Could you check with the guys and make sure it's okay? I wonder if it's okay? All right, Jerry told me not to unmute that, and I had it unmuted. I hope I didn't screw it up. Okay, anyway, so back to the story. So what I learned about the Bodhi resolve was that it's two things. One is, they say, Shang Cheng Fo Dao. Ultimately, my potential is to realize deep wisdom. I can do that. You can do that. You can do that. We can do it. Nobody lacks that potential. So nothing else had to change. OK， 好，对，好，我就用这个。那个太高，我把2个 ，Yeah， 麻烦你 ，Yeah， too loud now， 现在太高。那你要不要挂的？我用的就是这个 ，Yeah， 可不可以低一点哈 ？OK，So，that's the first half is Shang Cheng Fo Dao, which means I know what I'm capable of. Mostly we don't believe that, or we never had the thought that that's something I might do, that I could do it. So, okay, suppose you do. You say, yeah, I'm not going to make $1 million. I'm not going to, start my own company and sell it on the NASDAQ, but I could have the wisdom of a Buddha. That's my goal. And the second half is the powerful one. the way I do that is to clean up my mind. How do I clean up my mind? It's called 下化众生. I take living beings across. Well, that's code language. What is code language? The living beings who I take across are my own insecurities, my own fears, my own doubts, my own arrogance, my own desires, etc., etc. Those are the living beings who I'm going to take across. Okay, so how do I get those living beings to stop feeling afflicted, which they do most of the time, one problem or the other? The answer is use the Dharma. Okay, how do you get those living beings to stick around and listen to you? What if they're your kids and they're just not interested in listening to you at all? What if they're your spouse and you're not talking at the moment? How do those living beings ever get a feeling that maybe you're worth listening to? The answer is shan jie shan yuan. You have to make good ties with them. You have to connect to them. How do you do that? Well, do you ever have that feeling when you meet somebody for the first time that somehow you like that person and they're really kind of trustworthy and you could be friends if you had the chance? Could it be that the reason you have that feeling with that person is because in the past that person has been beaming out good wishes to you by transference? What is transference? It's a beacon, it's a broadcast from your mind to living beings saying, I want to give my good stuff to you. And you do it a lot, and invisibly, those living beings, whoever they are, and it can be your own bad habits, those beings in your mind, but even people around you who go, oh, yeah, well, that's a good idea. Yeah, let's go to the monastery. Let's go meditate. Let's go listen to the Sutra. You know. So, I'm suggesting that the way that you 下化众生, take living beings across, is you first create wholesome connections with them by giving things to them invisibly with your thoughts. The mind is such that if you are beaming out a wholesome wish at somebody, you can't also have negative thoughts at the same time, or no thoughts. So that directed 普皆回向, universally, every direction, transferring merit, there's a purpose for that. There's a reason why the Bodhisattva does that a lot. So that living beings, when they see him, go, this person is worth listening to. I think I will. I think I'll, listen to him. And then do what he says, do what she says. So, transference of merit has multiple values in it. Okay, so what do we do? First of all, we have to cultivate, create merit, and then transfer it. So we'll do a little bit of cultivation now together with the blessings song, just a bit of it, a little bit. We're going to do a little bit every week. And then we'll go back to our chapter 20, and then at the end, when we transfer, we will have multiple levels of merit and virtue to transfer. Okay, got the idea? Prepare for the crink. Ready? Oh, there we go. Okay, now remember your part? These are the highest blessings. These are the highest blessings. Right? Remember that part? Here we go. Thus have I heard that the Blessed One was staying at Shrivasti, residing at the Jada Grove in Anathapindika's park. Then, in the dark of the night, a radiant Deva illuminated all the Jada's grove. She bowed down low before the Blessed One. Then standing to one side, she said, all you readers of Chinese, Devas are concerned for happiness, and ever long for peace. The same is true for humankind. What then are the highest blessings? Okay, there's the Dharma request, okay? Right? Recognize that? So a Deva, they say a female, a Devi, came down to ask the Buddha how to live right in order to be happy and peaceful. And the Buddha said, avoiding those of foolish ways, associating with the wise, honoring those worthy of honor. Here we go, ready? These are the highest blessings. These are the highest blessing. Good. Here we go. Living in places of suitable kinds with the fruits of past good deeds, and guided by the rightful way. All right, our turn. Here we go. These are the highest blessings. These are the highest blessings. Accomplished in learning and craftsman skills, with discipline highly trained, and speech that is true and pleasant to hear. Here we go. These are the highest blessings. These are the highest blessings. So you can see the there are 38 specific behaviors that the Buddha praises in this sutra. They're grouped into 12 sections, and every week we'll look at another one. But staying away from fools, getting close to wise people, honoring worthy people, those are the highest blessings. Live in a good place where the results of things you've done before follow you, where you've created good karma, and guided by the rightful way. In other words, do the right stuff. Be righteous. Those are the highest blessings. And now, this is really interesting. So, what are you good at? If you can work with your hands, if you have any kind of trade, are you a cook? Are you a gardener? Do you sew? Are you a writer? Are you a musician? Do you build anything? Are you a calligrapher? What did you learn from your mom? What did you learn from your dad? Etc. All those are craftsman skills that you had to sacrifice. You had to do that instead of go out and play. And also how you speak. The highest blessings right there. Okay, we will continue later on that. Let us return to our sutra. Let me go. Ready? Here we go. 随问如来生，因生非如来，亦不离于生，能知正等觉。Okay. Although we hear the Tathagata's voice, that voice is not the Tathagata. And yet, when we perceive the one of right awakening, it is not apart from that voice.
It is not apart from her voice.
Okay, there we go. So, look here. This is another what is this about? This answers the question, where is the Buddha? Or, who is the Buddha? So, you can hear the Buddha's voice. You could even say that we're hearing the Buddha's voice right now in the sutra. And you all, by chanting along, dee da 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 dee dee da 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 dee dum. That's the Buddha's voice. You have just put voice to the words of the Buddha in the sutra. So, stretching the point. Although we hear the Tathagata's voice, that voice is not the Buddha. And yet, when you finally see the Buddha, when you finally get to see face to face the actual Buddha, his voice is right there with him. So, does that, if you can follow that, if you can see the step by step, the logic in that, and catch the question he is posing, it's like, yeah, I never thought of that. What is he saying? He's saying the Buddha is infinite, wu bu zai, wu so bu zai. He's not there, and he's never not there. So that fundamental contradiction, that fundamental tautology, it's not a tautology, that's a dilemma. There's two opposing things. How can they both be right at the same time? And he's saying, yes, they are. And as soon as we stop insisting it's A or B, right or wrong, true or false, our mind can transcend duality and find the Buddha. The problem is not with the Buddha. The problem is with the limitation of the thing that we're looking at the Buddha with, our ability to know. It's us. Because why? We're in a body. And that body only knows things through language, right? Did you first, what alphabet did you learn first? Was it Vietnamese? Was it Hanzi? Was it ABC? Was it What was the first language that you learned? You know, a, I, u, e, o, ka, ki, ku, ke, ko, sa, chi, su, se, so, na, ni, nu, ne, no. Japanese. What language did you learn first? That has a lot to do with how much you were able to see the Buddha. Because it's limited. It's all limited. Just try a different language and suddenly, oh, I don't speak Russian. I don't speak Greek. Oh. So how limited is that? And yet the Buddha is there. Nowhere he's not. So, okay. Thank you, Bodhisattva, Forest of Knowledge, for pointing this out. Because what do we want? Well, seeing the Buddha would be a nice thing, wouldn't it? It'd be nice to see the Buddha. That would be a thrill. I think it would calm my heart, get rid of my insecurities, my anxieties about my future or my past. So, I want to ask each of you here, there's a couple dozen of us here. You can ask everybody online too. How did you first see the Buddha? Your first representation of the Buddha. Can I see, just for fun, we have friends in the balcony and friends down below. Just we turn the cameras off, so nobody is, going to pin you down there's no wrong answer. How many of you saw the Buddha because a member of your family was a Buddhist who had like Buddha images at home or Buddha sutras? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Oh, quite a few. 10. Wow. Okay, not me. Wasn't my case. So 10, maybe half of the audience here had a family member who had brought in a Buddha into the home of some sort. How many of you were taken to a monastery or a temple as a child? Had the experience as a kid of going to a monastery? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. Okay, good. Buddhist families. That's why you would choose to spend Saturday night here at the monastery. Okay. Weirdo. Oh, man. Can't think. Why aren't you out bowling with your friends? So, pretty good. So, of our community here, for those of you online who can't see the Berkeley Monastery Buddha Hall, more than half of us here tonight were taken to a monastery as a child. Probably if we could see everybody online tonight, a lot of hands would be going up too. How many of you, your first encounter with any kind of Buddhism whatsoever, the language of the Buddha, like Prajna or Diamond Sutra or Guanxuyin, how many of us first encountered Buddhism via books and literature? 2.5. Guojian, you're a half. Guohua, okay, halves. Okay, do you remember what it was? Whose hand went up over here? Okay, Ming-Chi, what was it? You remember what book it was?
I think it was a
Diamond Sutra. Okay, in what language? In English. Okay, good. Guohua, Guojian,是哪个? Jinggang Jing. 真的. Jinggang Jing. Was there another hand back here? Other hand went up? Yeah, what was it? Naigashu? Yeah, please.
It was an essay about Buddhism.
An essay? In Japanese. Ah, so desu ka. Was it positive or was it critical?
Positive.
Positive, okay.
But it didn't really refer to any particular sutra.
Okay.
It was about Buddhist philosophy.
Philosophy. Good enough, yeah. Mine, So, 面白いですね. So, my first one was just the title. The Dharma Bums, Jack Kerouac. Okay, now, if in this room tonight we had about 15 or 20 baby boomer Americans, particularly guys, and I asked that question, I would ask this question. How many of you first encountered something vaguely Buddhist when you saw the TV show Kung Fu with Michael Carradine? Hands would go up all over the room. Good. Okay. If you were a certain age and were watching television back in the 1970s or 80s, I guess, there was a TV series, Kung Fu, and the guy's name was Kane, Kwai Chang Kane. He was the actor David Carradine, and he had a kind of an Aussie bush hat on, and he had this kind of constantly poker face, and he wandered through the West and getting challenged because he was half Chinese, and his eyes looked slightly Asian, and tough bullies in every town he went in would challenge him. The story went, he had been trained at Shaolin Monastery. And of course, it was a Hollywood version of Shaolin Monastery, very Hollywood. And so he would resolve the conflicts with Kung Fu. And many, many, many of the people who I meet at meditation halls, my age, they go, oh yeah, Kung Fu. That got me started. I was fascinated. How did he learn that stuff, And so, yeah, is that the Buddha? No, but it's Buddhistic. It's an essay describing Buddhist philosophy, pointing 2 steps further, you meet the Buddha. That's where, for example, the funny meme, maybe you've seen it, is choose wisely, grasshopper. Anybody seen that one? Choose wisely, grasshopper. Who is that? That was Kwai Chang Kane's blind sifu, Tada Shifu, at Shaolin Si. His sifu, who was blind, could, he would say, throw your best punch, blind. Okay, and Kane would say, no, sifu, I can't do that. Throw your best punch, listen to your teacher. And Kane would throw his best punch, and the blind teacher would go, and parry it perfectly, and you couldn't hit him, even though he was blind, because he had Kung Fu. So, Kungfu, that was a really important moment in Western culture to introduce something slightly Buddhist to a generation who understood and watched. It was really popular show. Hold on. Here we go. Kung Fu TV show. There he is. There's David Carradine. And here's his blind sifu. Right there. This is what he looked like. And that was the Shifu. And if you analyze it, look at that. He's actually wearing a robe, right? That's David Carradine. And I've heard a lot of people be critical of him because he was a ballet dancer. David Carradine had some training in ballet, and his kung fu was terrible. He, instead of dropping his weight and going down, he would rise up on his toes like a ballet dancer, So they said that his kung fu was not genuine. So, but just to say, there it is right there. Kung fu. That was many people's, of my generation, our first introduction to anything slightly Buddhist. So, how did we first see the Buddha? I'll trade you. Thank you for that. Okay, there's a little bit left, but it's cold. So, yeah. So, how did we first see the Buddha? Okay. Question. for how many of us, probably not so many, for many of us, how many said this is the Buddha? Okay, yes? Yeah, right? Okay, see, definitely. He's, what I'm showing on the screen, for those of you who don't have access to video here, this is Mila Pusa, Dadu Mila Pusa, big belly. We've talked about him 2 weeks ago. And, okay, he's a Buddha, sort of, but he gets corrupted into this. Kai kou bian xiao, xiao yi qie ke xiao zhi ren. Right? He opens his mouth and laughs at all the people who are laughable in the world. He further gets corrupted into this, where a lot of Chinese culture is encoded into this, right? Money, leaning on piles of money. Well, okay. So, and then, as we mentioned, this is the really scary one. World domination. Where did this come from? So, okay, and we talked at length about how it's not because he overeats. He would definitely shoot insulin in the morning because he'd be a diabetic if he were this big. So, now, the point is, he is patient. 度大能容，容一切难容之事，难容世界，难容之事。His belly is big because he can hold all the things in the world that are hard to endure. So, it's through his patience that he gets this capacity. That's the idea. All right, so why did the painters, why did the artists pick him to look like that? For the same reason that Shansai Tongzi, Sudana, becomes a little baby. Sudana is not a little baby. He's strapping, bodhisattva. But artist, it's called iconography. The artists depict them that way, just as culture grows. So, is that the Buddha? Well, somebody else will tell you that actually that's not Maitreya, that's not the Buddha, this is the Buddha. And you go, but that doesn't look anything like the other one. How come this one got to be called the Buddha? Well, images. The image is not the Buddha, but you don't get the Buddha without this image either. Okay, so the point is, how we conceive of the Buddha is different with every individual. What I think is interesting is that Chir Lin Pusa, our knowledge forest of knowledge bodhisattva, is saying, I'll tell you who the Buddha is. The Buddha is everything. And if you try to force it with your eyes and see him, you won't. Because your eyes are limited scope. They can't see much. Just already my eye can't see my hand, and yet now it can. That's weird, So, yeah, that's the Avatamsaka bodhisattvas telling us about the Buddha. But he also says, if you want to see the Buddha, simply stop discriminating right and wrong, me and mine, I want, I don't want, I love, I hate. Take the me out of the middle, and suddenly everything is us, and we are part of everything. So it's a positive message. And what I like about that message is, if you're a Christian, if you're a Hindu, if you're a Muslim, if you're a Jew, if you're a Sikh, if you're a Jain, they can't say that. well, Hindus, the Vedantas do, but no religion with a God out there can ever say, you will see him if you get rid of the self. You can see the Buddha, but you have to cultivate and go from conscious mind to wisdom. All right, so what's hard is when you got a 6-year-old, and the 6-year-old comes in and says, where's the Buddha? Who is the Buddha? Mom, Dad, Jie, Ge, Da Ge. Who's the Buddha? And there you are, stuck on the spot, having to describe the Buddha. So, 3 steps, 1 bow. And Marty and I are bowing. Outside of Ventura, and a pickup truck comes rolling by. It's 5 p.m. And this guy drives by and shouts at us, get up off the street, you losers. I can't do it because I don't have any volume. And we're like, okay. He drives by again. I told you to get off the street. Quit kissing the sidewalk. And then drives by again. Get up from there, you dirty. Not suitable language for a sutra lecture. And then the guy parks his truck up ahead and comes stomping back. And this guy, we don't know if he's into violence or what. So he comes stomping back. And because I don't talk, we were bowing right there in Ventura. Highway 1 and 101 are the same, and they're super busy. We're bowing in place, so we're sitting ducks. And so the guy decides, he watches, and he got his fist clenched, and he says, I can't stand it, he says. Who are you bowing to? And he looks ahead. He watches us bow. He looks ahead. He says, you bowing to your big God? He says, who the hell is the Buddha anyway? And Marty stands up, and on inspiration, he says, well, that's a really good question. He says, he's the best part of you. And the guy's like, and he stops. And you can see that, number one, because Marty is not the slightest bit aggressive or defensive. That's the first thing. He just kind of disarms him. But the second thing is, this guy heard that answer. What do you mean, the best part of me? Marty says, the part that figures stuff out. What do you? And suddenly his volume drops by half. He says, what are you talking about? Marty says, well, something we're doing really matters to you. The guy's like, no, that can't be true, You're losers, and you came by 3 times and parked your truck and wanted to talk to us. And the guy's like, well, and now it's like it's coming up, and the guy's quiet for 5 minutes, and he watches us bow, and then he comes over and says, when you're done, could I talk to you? So it was almost 5 o'clock, so we stopped, and the guy waited, and we bowed and transferred merit for the day, and then he sat down, and he, the cliche, poured out his life story. He poured out his life story to Marty, and he just talked about how he was stuck in a job he hated, and he found himself angry with his wife for no reason, and he knew it was his fault, but he somehow couldn't stop, and nothing appealed. He couldn't find a single thing in his life that was worth anything. It seemed that all the doors ahead of him had closed. He could see nothing ahead. And he said, and then I see the two of you, you're here doing this useless thing, and you look happy. This can't be right. We can't both be right, that I'm all wrong and that you're happy. So, and, Marty just wisely just let him go and let him talk and talk. And Marty said, well, we're just, we're using the Buddha's teaching to look within and find what matters. And trying to make a more peaceful world is what mattered to the two of us. And the guy said, yeah, but you're both losers. And Marty says, no, I left my PhD program at Wisconsin to become a monk. And this one here got his MA at Cal, UC Berkeley, And so, but we decided that there was something more important than worldly ambition. And somehow, just that message, this guy had been driven by worldly ambition, but not his own. He was a thoughtful, insightful, deep individual who wanted to figure out important questions. But on the path he was on, which was go, 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 and yet he hadn't been able to go, go, go. He had, he wasn't, quote, successful, go, go, going. He didn't have any support for looking into the deeper questions. So the part that figures stuff out, the best part of himself, nobody had ever said to him, go for it. Figure stuff out. That's what really matters. Not that worldly success is unimportant. No, worldly success can be a result of doing something that you care about. But if you're only doing it because others tell you you have to or you should, and your heart is not there, that is guaranteed misery. That's a road to affliction, which he had encountered. And so the guy, he just said, he said, I can't stand it. He drove away. He just, he came back the next day with a loaf of bread, and he came back the next day with a bushel of apples, and he came back the third day. He saw us through Ventura with offerings every day, and on the third day, he said, I was at the library, I was looking up philosophy. He said, I think I'm gonna start thinking things over, he said. So, there you go. Who's the Buddha? And yet, this guy, because he drove by us and shouted at us, pretty awful stuff. That third pass, he was, because he had the itch, and I guess the affinity, to stop and ask. So he was able to recognize the priorities in himself. And he saw in the two monks bowing the Buddha, so to speak. That is to say, people who were asking those questions. What's important in life? So how do you see the Buddha? I will say, if the Buddha is only the guy on the altar, then that's a partial answer. If the Buddha is not the guy on the altar, that's also not right either, because it gives us a focus to bow. Chin-fo Shi recites Ami Tofo with 100 people every day, and because there is an Ami Tofo with a name, so all that goodness gets focused. How many people worldwide wait for 12:30 or 1 o'clock, 12:30 to 1 o'clock to recite the name, and then go off, and because they recited Ami Tofo for half an hour, don't get angry that day, or don't scold somebody, or don't cheat, or don't, I'm going to sneeze here. they don't break their precepts because they had that chance to recite just a half hour, or maybe even hear Amitofo, right? What a difference it makes. And yet, where is Amitofo? Well, you have to go to the Pure Land to find him. And you could point to a statue. Is that Amitofo? Well, that's not Amitofo, but is that Amitofo? No, that's a statue. That's a representation of the Buddha. And yet, Amitofo at one point did not exist. If we take that story and say, where did that story come from? Well, the Buddha said, there was a monk called Fazan who said, I'm going to make a world where there's no suffering. So at one point, that monk, Fazan, was a baby. And somehow she saw a Buddha, or heard the Dharma, or met the Sangha, and said, oh, I can do that. That's interesting, you know. And then started out cultivating, and the result is the Pure Land in the West, where there's no suffering. And it's always Impossible Burgers, Impossible Whoppers. I was standing in the St. Louis airport, and I had, for some reason, I don't know how I managed it, but I had 7-hour layover in the St. Louis airport. I came from Detroit to St. Louis at 7 a.m., and my flight out was 3 my flight to Oakland. And so that's over lunch hour. And I had an apple and 2 chocolate chip cookies and a power bar in my bag from Toledo. And so there was a Big Burger. There was right? Big Burger? No. What's it called? Where are the Whoppers? Impossible Whoppers? Burger King. There was a Burger King. And I thought, well, if I get an Impossible Whopper, that should do it. Maybe 2. But whenever I get 2, I can't finish the second one, and it's wasteful. So I went over, and you know how they do it. There's breakfast. The breakfast goes until 11, and they don't switch the menu. So the breakfast menu is entirely meat, bacon, ham, and nothing that I wanted. And so then at 11 o'clock, they switched the menus over, flip, and said, oh, there's the Whopper. And the line was about 25 people deep. It was suddenly, long line. And I went over and I looked, and the smells coming out of the dead cow smell, and the grease, the old grease smell coming out of the restaurant. And it's lined up with, 5 other restaurants in a row, because it was the food court at the St. Louis airport. It's a nice airport. But I just looked at it and I thought, am I going to get in line and pull $10 out of my bag and hand it to the lady who looked so unhappy, the serving lady who was like, she was working so hard, and people were giving her a hard time. And she was like, what will that be? You want mustard and ketchup on that? With fries? Lady, you left your, and so I thought, when I get that, I'm going to sit there and chew on this. And it sure looks like meat, and it sure smells like meat. It's not. It's an Impossible Burger, Impossible Whopper. And I thought, just wait. You'll be back in Berkeley in a couple hours. Just wait. Don't trade your money for this experience, And I'm like, So I didn't. I wound up with what did I get? I got a soy hot chocolate. And not there, at the coffee shop down the way. And there were, so I was sitting, I found a nice quiet corner of a departure lounge and sat there. And so, yeah. the lunch that didn't happen in the St. Louis airport. Amidofo. So when we see the Buddha, how do we recognize him? Do we? You know, Grandma says, this is the Buddha. She puts her hand behind your head, bow. I see that. You know, Grandma's pushing the child's head down. The kid's like, what am I doing here? First impression, unhappy in the Buddha place, you know. Grandma wants me to put my head on the ground. Why? You know. So, better, that was brand X. The high price spread, the right way to do it is Grandma sees the monk or the Buddha image and bows. And she's really happy. Want to try it? You know, you can do it with me if you like, you know. Give the kid the choice. Don't force them to bow. Let them see you happily bowing, and they will automatically try it out. Kids are curious. Really important. First message. But this pushing the kid's head down, not wise parenting, you know. So, word to the wise. Okay, we have 3 verses left in this. We've got Bodhi neither comes nor goes. Sorry. We have 2 to go, and chapter 19 and chapter 20 are finito. 讲完了. You know, we're done with chapters 19 and chapter 20. So, the next choice that we have to make is what text will we lecture next? And is good. In our Avatamsaka translation committee, I think it was Jin Yongshi, or I forget exactly, it might have been Jin Roshi, who said, what about chapter 39, Ru Fa Chepin, the Ganda Vyuha, entering the Dharma realm? And my first response was, wow, that's so long. It is 1/4 of the entire Avatamsaka Sutra. I said, if I say, I vow that I will lecture the entirety of chapter 39, that might mean I live a couple decades longer. I won't finish until I'm 90, you know, till you're all 20 years older. Jayo. So anyway, the thing about the Ganda Vyuha, Rufa Chepin, chapter 39, is that there's the first, how many dren is it? It's multiple dren, multiple scrolls, but the first 4 of them are introduction. The Buddha announces he's going to explain it. All the bodhisattvas show up. All the spirits show up. And one by one, they take their turn to praise the Buddha. And it takes a long time. There's a long, long section to get through before Sudana shows up. What happens in between is Manjushri Bodhisattva appears. And with Manjushri are 6,000 bhikshus. And they all show up, and Manjushri praises Sudana. Sudana appears at the head of 300 young, they call them tongzas, young men and young women. And he looks very, stunning, really amazing. And not a little baby. He starts to praise Manjushri Bodhisattva. Manjushri says, this young man is a Tsai Fa Chi, a vessel that can hold the Dharma. And he says, you go south. Go see Cloud of Virtue Bhikshu and ask him how to cultivate Bodhisattva practices and how to walk the Bodhisattva path. And Sudana says, does that mean I have to leave you? He says, yes, you do. He cries. He doesn't want to leave Manjushri. He says, go south. Because I don't know the whole story, but if you ask him, he'll tell you. So Sudana says, okay, goodbye. Goes out the door south. And that's the beginning of the chapter, the beginning of the action in the chapter, but it's already 5 scrolls in. So, in other words, if we were to start with chapter 39, it would be a little on the dry side for years, the speed that we go. So, I mentioned that, and it was either Jin Yongshi or Jin Roshi said, well, what if you chant the first part instead of explaining it? And we could. How we actually approach it is entirely up to us. We don't have to go, thus I have heard. Okay, thus means, and I means, and we have heard. Heard is Ananda heard it. We don't have to do every word. We can recite the praises of the bodhisattvas and move along until we get to Manjushri's appearance. So there are options, but I'm thinking that might be a really interesting chapter because, oh man, Sudana, 53 teachers, it's really lively. And you get to hear from all these incredible Shanjish, Kalyana Mitra, all the good and wise advisors. So do people think that's appealing? Does that sound like a good idea? Chapter 39? Yeah? Okay, we're thinking that way. It's going to take a little bit of special organizing, but I think we'll do that. All right. Here comes a bump. Oh. Namo Do Bao Ru Lai, Namo Bao Sheng Ru Lai, Namo Miao Sha Sheng Ru Lai, Namo Guang Bo Sheng Ru Lai, Namo Li Bu Wei Ru Lai, Namo Gan Ru Wang Ru Lai, Namo Amito Ru Lai. One more time. Namo Do Bao Ru Lai, Namo Bao Sheng Ru Lai, Namo time. Namo Do Bao Ru Lai, Namo Bao Sheng Ru Lai, Namo Miao Sha Sheng Ru Lai, Namo Guang Bo Sheng Ru Lai, Namo Li Bu Wei Ru Lai, Namo Gan Ru Wang Ru Lai, Namo Amito Ru Lai. Played on the low string. Alrighty. Those names are very useful if you have pets or children. Have you all heard Shifu sing the Song of Enlightenment? On Fridays, when my voice is still working, we listen to Shifu Shangren reciting the Song of Enlightenment. And we've got his voice from 1985 reciting it. It takes 17 minutes reciting from memory.
正世间无人法，常也见恶彼呀。照见王于方中生，自照八舍尘沙界。顿教了如来禅，六度万行即正圆。一明明有六趣，
脚后空空无大千，水泪不损益。
寂灭心中问你，必来尘间未曾摸须分明须剖析。
He said, any day that you can recite the Zhangdao Ge from memory is a day that you will have no afflictions, you'll have no worries, no troubles. All will be well. So it's, we go verse by verse every week, and we're 2/3 through. Let me show you what it looks like. Pick out a good one. Oh, here we go. Jian Fa Chuang Li Zong Zhi, Ming Ming Fo Chi Zao Xi Shi, Di Yi Jia She Shou Chuan Dang, 28代西迁徙。 Raise the Dharma flag, set the teachings course. The Buddha unmistakably said Cao Shi was the source. The lamp of Dharma passed along through Mahakashipa. Through generations 28, it came from India. Right? So every week we do one more, and you're welcome to join. Well, you get to hear Shifu, you get to hear we're among the very few people in the whole world who have heard the Song of Enlightenment sung in English. So at some point we'll be done, we can sing the whole thing. Now it's time for us to transfer merit. We've got merit from hearing the sutra, merit from the Blessings Sutra, Mangala Sutta. We've got listened to and sung along with Song of Enlightenment and all kinds of thoughts. Ask ourselves, who is the Buddha to me? Where did I first meet the Buddha? How do I think of the Buddha? And those are all meritorious actions. We can transfer that merit, give it away the way a bodhisattva does. I dedicate this merit to fill in the blank with the wish that fill in the blank. Tie up your affinities with living beings. Here we go. Ready? Here we go. Om Namo Bhagavate Vaisajya Vaidurya Prabharajaya Tathagataaya Arahate Samyak Sambuddhaya Tathagata Om Vaisajya 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 samyak sambuddhaya tadyata Vaisaje Vaisaje Vaisaja Sankate Swaha Om Namo Bhagavate Vaisaja Vaidurya Pravarajaya Vatakataya Arahate Samyak Sambuddhaya Ayata Vaisaje Vaisaje Vaisaja Samukate Swaha Righty. And here are multiple Buddhas to bow to. You want to join me, everyone? Bow in respect to the Venerable Master. All right, that will do it for us tonight. See you all next week. Amitofo.